Welcome to Experience Talks, the radio magazine for the experienced listener. I'm Cynthia Friedlob. This show is from our 2010 Experience Talks archives. Tony Curtis is one of the most beloved stars in the history of Hollywood, starring in films like Some Like It Hot, The Defiant Ones, Spartacus, The Boston Strangler, and The Sweet Smell of Success. Tony enjoyed a second career as a world-renowned fine artist, and he co-founded the Shiloh Horse Sanctuary with his wife Jill. Tim Carpenter interviewed Tony Curtis in front of an audience of fans at the Fletcher Jones Auditorium on the campus of Woodbury University in Burbank, thanks to the support from the National Endowment of the Arts. Now, here's Tim.
I grew up in a movie theater, literally. Small town, upstate New York, the Proctors, the only game in town. It's where I first saw Spartacus. They played Some Like It Hot on revival Saturdays, and I saw it 5 times. So for a lifelong film addict, meeting Tony Curtis was an experience, to say the least. He's 84 now. He's had a long and not-so-easy life, and his body and face have changed a bit, of course. But the eyes, that voice, I'm thinking, this is Tony freaking Curtis, man. After thunderous and seemingly unending applause, I opened by asking him about his life in the movies, and he talked about Marilyn Monroe, making films in the early days, his respect for Cary Grant, and how he started as a painter in New York.
150 films in 60 years. And if I'd been in a hurry, maybe another 10 more films. But I've always felt that the doing was the experience. And what I mean by that is I never counted what I was doing. I once had an agent called his name was Lou Wasserman, a brilliant man. And he told me when I first started, I had just signed with them, and this was 1948, about 1950. And he said to me, if you make 3 pictures a year, 10 years from now, you'll be a famous player. Well, I was sitting there at 22, 23, and 10 years was impossible. I couldn't even write the number 10. I got up to 7 or 8, and that was the end of it. And then the work started. I was thrilled to be in the movies. I always wanted to be in the movies. At Universal Pictures, yes. And as a number of the movies were there at the beginning. And then I was loaned out to other studios. And then I bim-bammed all over the place. I must have played in each one of your neighborhoods. Before I got to Maryland, there were about 8 or 9 girls. I enjoyed it all. You know, in those early days, the girls that came to want to be in the movies were all so shy and really giving. It wasn't a profession where a girl felt that all she had to do was come sliding in and she'd have a career. It wasn't that easy. There were some girls who had producers that liked them very much. Now, they may have liked them as a girlfriend, but as a working actress, it wasn't quite as easy. So a girl like Marilyn had to knew 2 or 3 different producers. I was 22, 23. She was 3 years younger than I. And so she was 20, 19 or 20 then. And she had to go out on her own and learn what the parameters were for a girl. But she was no girl. When you looked at her, you saw a very beautiful creature, let us call it, you know, with everything on it. And so she had a lot of action. But it was all right because she wanted the action, because she wanted to get in the movies. So at 20, 22, she was just starting out. I was just starting out. And in the first 4 or 5 years, I started to develop a feeling of working in the movies, you know? I felt something about the movies that was special and different. It's like in this room now, in a room filled with 50, 80 people who were working on the film, prop men, electricians, people of that kind, assistant directors, extras, filled up a stage this size. And you had to learn to function in it in this silence. And there I would be sitting next to a girl, holding her in my arms, with 52 people watching. So I had to work at my technique. I couldn't be slovenly. I had to calm down. And here I was coming out of the Bronx in New York City, where calming down, you got hit by a car. The other films I did were as important as Some Like It Hot. Each picture had its own organism. And in that case was the director and all the other people, plus the producers that once in a while showed up to let you know they were producing the movie. And it was a very complex environment. And what's the word I'm looking for the number one who was hit up in the place, and who was number two. Who did you say good morning to? Me, I used to say good morning to horses in New York City. I'd say good morning to anybody, cockroaches. Morning. I just loved living. In those early days growing up in New York City, I never found it an obstacle, a difficulty, except in a couple of areas. I had a brother named Julie, who was 3 years younger than I. My father was a tailor, and we lived in the back of the tailor store with my mother. There were 4 of us. And in 1938, when my brother was 4, just maybe younger, and I was, no, he was older than that. I was just turning 12. He got hit by a truck and killed. It was a horrible experience for me. He was the only one I could relate to. And my father, in New York City, you know the squares in the street, would give me a piece of chalk that he used to make clothing. And he'd say, go and play. So I'd go out to see these chalked area, and it was like a canvas. So that's where I learned to paint. I learned perspective and balance and what I thought it was. And so that's where I got my education. Later on, I had someone who was a professor at it who showed me some points. But that's when I started being a painter. So being a painter and yearning to be an actor are one in one with me. I find if I'm not doing one, I'm doing the other. Cary Grant, for me, was the epitome of what a man should be. He was handsome, dressed impeccably, was always so nice to ladies on the screen, always lit their cigarettes, helped them out of the chair. Did you notice that if you knew him? Always had these wonderful parts, and I just loved him. I was nuts about him. I would go to the movies just to watch him in a picture. And there wasn't anything he did that I did not want or do that I didn't want to do myself. I started dressing with my father, a tailor, it wasn't too difficult. A jacket cut a certain way. No one knew it but me. The button up here had to be an inch from the end of it, not more than that. So it gave just a little pull. Ooh. I was nuts about that pull. Thinking of the movies I was in, I loved almost all of them. I loved all of them, finished, cut together, musicalized, and watching it an hour and a half, 2.5 hours on the screen. There wasn't a picture I made that I didn't enjoy and put all of my energy in, simply because. Do you know that expression, into perpetuity? I only learned it a week ago. No, I learned it early. Into perpetuity meant that when you signed a contract to get in the movies, or get in a movie, or sign to do a movie, that contract you signed was into perpetuity. That meant forever. And I imagine that one day there will be rocket ships all on this planet, because we're going to have to get off here because it's falling apart. And these rocket ships will be flying in the air until they land in other planets. And in these rocket ships, no more bigger than this, a case will be any movie ever made. And in the world, outside the world, the universe, people will get to know me. So you see, I have to be a gentleman everywhere I go. Because a little bit of that, I don't want these people on other planets to think of me as a schnorrer. You know what the word schnorrer is? I don't, but I like to say.
The Defiant Ones came out in 1958 and marked a rite of passage for Tony Curtis as a dramatic actor. He was recognized for his performance with an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, along with his co-star Sidney Poitier. Here's a clip from the film and what Tony had to say about starring in that one and another of his more dramatic roles in the Boston Strangler.
I used to park cars in Nash's. Big fancy hotel. The fella give me his car and I'd say, "Thank you, sir." Here I was doing him a favor, but I had to say, "Thank you, sir." And the louder I said it, the bigger the tip.
And that figures.
That don't figure nothing. You gotta be Charlie Potatoes, a man with the money. Then you don't have to bow down to nobody. That's the way I'm gonna live. Even when he didn't give me a tip, I still had to say thank you. That word got like it was sticking needles in me every time I said it. That can happen with a word. You know what I mean, boy?
Yeah. And I got a needle sticking in me right now. Look, Joker, don't call me boy.
Why, you're just too sensitive, man.
I'm too nothing.
That's right. You're too nothing is right. But I got a little advice for you, man, because I like you, man. You got to take things as they are. You can't keep fighting them unless you want to be unhappy. I see you got a lot to learn, boy.
To make that movie, they gave me the script. And they had given it to Marlon Brando, but he was not interested in doing it for whatever reason. And I read it and I liked it. I said, well, who's going to be my fellow actor, the black actor? They said, well, they mentioned a number of names, Harry Belafonte, who was a friend of mine, Sidney Poitier, who I knew, and there they were, and they had to work out their contracts with the company. We were going to be making the movie. And at that time, the joke around was that Kirk Douglas liked the script and he wanted to play the black man. They said, he'll tell us which part he wants, but you couldn't play the... I said, well, listen, will you call me when you're ready? And they did. And they got Sidney Poitier. And they said, "You've got top billing, of course." I said, "Of course." And they said the billing will be Tony Curtis in The Defiant Ones, co-starring Sidney Poitier. I thought about it for a while. I didn't talk to anybody about it but myself. I said, how could they do this picture that way? Here we are, chained together through the whole film, and they barely mentioned Sidney's name. That offended me. I'm an American Jew, raised in that environment, in these cities that I grew up in. And I was pushed around, bummed around, couldn't do certain things because I was a Jew. Look how much better I had it than Sidney. He couldn't take that color off, change his name to O'Brien and do it. Well, I could. So this were I'm telling you the truth, this were the dilemmas for me and the difficulty for me. So I told my agent, or whoever I was talking, I said, I'm not going to do the picture. They asked me why. They had already submitted it to Marlon Brando. They already submitted it to Robin Mitchum. They were all new actors that they've given it to. I liked it because it was an action movie. I'd be running around all the time. And they just hesitated for such a long time about it. Finally, they agreed that I could play the part. And they were going to get Sidney Poitier under the business I described before. And I looked at my agent and his gray eyes and glasses. I said, I'm not going to do the movie. They said, why? I said, I want Sidney Poitier above the title with me. I said, I still want top billing, but I want Tony Curtis, Sidney Poitier in The Defiant Ones. They said, well, Tony, the studio doesn't want to have to go making prints of the two of you and then separate. I said, please, that's your problem, not mine. I'm telling you how I'm willing to make this movie. And this was important to me. This was the first film that I stepped up for whatever. Up into that movie, whoever they cast in the picture to be my leading lady, Zazu Pitts, whoever you wanted, put her in the movie. But not in this case. There was something eating my stomach. I could understand what Sidney had been through. So I said no. And they finally came around and said yes. And I was thrilled, because when the picture was over and you saw the billing, Sidney was always so pleased and appreciative. And there's nothing appreciative about it. It was, I needed a black actor, sign a black actor. Forget about the billing and all of that. I described that to you to give you an insight to what it's like working in a movie. I really love the Boston Strangler. It was such an interesting part for me, where I would let all of me go so that I was only worked for what the scene told me. And I felt Albert C. Salvo was like that. That is, he walked down the street with his child or went shopping. There was an emptiness in him. And it was something that he had to constantly fight against. And then finally, when all of the ingredients were in it, he could turn into that monster and kill. Oh. In the movie, we did 12 killings. In reality, he must have done 50 or 60. What a way to get home.
Tony talked a lot about his early days in Manhattan, his art, and his secret to being happy. My brother Tom and I got to spend a few hours with him, and we couldn't help but be drawn in by his charm, his wit, and his true interest in everyone he meets. And I mean everyone he meets. Tony Curtis represents a generation of Hollywood stars not long for this world, and all of us felt lucky to spend an evening with a legend.
I've been painting all my life. I started painting when I was 7, 8 years old, outside of my father's tailor store, on those blocks, those cement blocks. I loved those days. Then as I started to improve, I always worked it out that I had somebody to could give me a few lessons. And then as I became an adult, people began to see the drawings I was doing. It's no easy path. It takes labor, it takes a lot of drawing. It takes a lot of pencils and empty paper. See, the thing about it is, unlike a musician, you need a piano. You can play the greatest music in the world, but you can only do it by a piano. And if you haven't got a piano, you got Goonish from Goonish, which means you got nothing from nothing. But if you're an artist, you can do that anywhere. So I did it anywhere, with pads of paper, little envelopes, back of anything I had. I was always drawing, always making a finer line. You know, as I did it, I could see where I had to improve, and I worked at that until I had it. It wasn't easy, but that's the way you do it. Very important. I would jump at anything, at any time. I jump on the back of trolley cars, and the back of cabs, screaming around the city of New York. And when the people in the back of the cab saw me, if they looked out the window, the woman would scream in the cab, and the cab driver would slam on the brakes, and I would go flying from them. I never fell backward. I always went forward. But I was such a good athlete that I was able to scamper away. So I always had wonderful moments, you know. I never got hurt. The trestles in New York City in the subways, which were the L's, I learned how to climb up those. I had friends of mine, a group of guys together, and that's what we did. Who could outjump the other? What could we do? Jump from one roof of a tenement house to the other with an empty space in between. Would have killed an ordinary man. The sense of living is such an open book. There's not a sound that we can hear now. But within it, a lot is happening. And for me, that not only was that environment, but the visual environment that came with it. It was always changing. There were always different things in front of me as a boy. And I had to learn the things that I could get away with, like jumping on the back of a cab or a trolley car. So physically I tried. You know what we used to do? We used to go out on a fire escape in the building we lived. And across the alley or the little street, we'd put 3 or 4 mattresses, which were never strong enough. And we'd get on the 2nd floor and stand for an hour looking down. Until we got so overwhelmed, you went, yeah! And I'd push myself off and land on my head, my back, but I did it. From then on, it came a lot easier. Some of my buddies landed badly, ambulances would come up to me. You know, it was a difficult experience, but it was something that I loved. It was something that demanded these things of me and made me the man I am today. I'm 84 years old. I've had a most wonderful life. I won't tell you how many times I've been married, But have you met my wife? Have you seen her yet? Ding dong, the witch is dead. So I've really had a wonderful life. And with it all, everything is a good experience. If you can tumble back to where you started. Because from where you started is all that information. And if you fall off or do something, that, when you recall it, becomes part of your education at any time in our lives.
And that's our show. You can get more information about any of our guests and listen to previous shows on our website at experiencetalks.org. Experience Talks is produced by the nonprofit Engage, catalyzing the art of active aging. Thanks to the production staff at KPFK Radio, and thanks to you for listening.